What's up, guys? Welcome to this week's episode of Healing Unfiltered. Super excited to be here with you guys. As always, I wanted to start with a little announcement. I know I kind of alluded to it in my last episode that there was something exciting coming, and I'm ready to share. So, when I was brainstorming about the podcast and trying to figure out what I wanted to do next with it, how I wanted to maneuver, and what I wanted to do to kind of change it up a little bit, I decided it was time to maybe start having some guests on the podcast. And so I have a great lineup of a few guests that are going to be joining me in the Healing Unfiltered space coming up here. I'm excited about these guests because I think they're going to bring something different to each conversation. We're not just getting typical mental health professionals, although, of course, there will absolutely be mental health professionals in the mix. But I want to talk about mental health from the scope of the world and all different types of people and professionals and perspectives. And so I'm really excited because the people that I'm going to have on, I think, are going to bring a really unique spin on some of the topics that maybe we have already talked about or brand new topics. And yeah, I'm really excited to get this thing going. So the next episode that you will be hearing will be my very first guest episode. My lovely, amazing friend, Christy Castillo, the host of the Unfuck Your Fitness podcast, is going to be joining me for this next episode after this one. And we're going to talk all things mental health, fitness, what holds us back, kind of the mindset behind it, what makes things really hard within fitness journeys, all of that kind of stuff. So stay tuned for that. There's way more to come, and I'm really excited to open the world of guests to the Healing Unfiltered podcast. So that is to come. That's my announcement. Now let's get into what I have going on for us today. Today, we're going to talk about a topic related to ADHD that I feel like is very under discussed, I'll say. I think there's a lot of focus in ADHD on the hyperactivity, the executive dysfunction, yes, and that's part of what we'll talk about today. Even overstimulation, all of those things that we know about, we've talked about on the podcast before too. But today I want to talk about ADHD and understimulation. I've had a couple conversations with a few clients recently where they've been really frustrated with their ADHD symptoms and executive dysfunction and how they haven't been able to do what they want to do. And it's led to these great conversations of like, well, maybe you're understimulated. Maybe it's not that you're just lazy. Maybe your brain is just needing more. So I think this is really important to discuss, not only to normalize a lot of the frustrating experiences associated with ADHD, but to give you some tools when you're feeling understimulated, or first of all, I guess, how to recognize when you are understimulated and what to do about it. So let's look at it this way. Understimulation is basically your brain is not getting enough of something. Your brain is not getting enough challenge, novelty, excitement, dopamine. And when I say those things, it doesn't have to be some grand, new, exciting, tremendous thing. It can be very small things, as we'll talk about towards the end of the episode. But understimulation basically means that your brain is needing more. And whatever task you're trying to set out on, your brain is having a really hard time locking in on it because there isn't enough stimulation to get you going. So instead of activating, it shuts down. It says, meh, that's not enough to get me going, so I'm just not gonna. And it can look like laziness, especially to the people around us. It can feel like I don't care, but I should care. Why don't I care? And what it really is a lack of dopamine activation. So what we know about the brain and ADHD, I'll give you a quick little neuro lesson on the brain and ADHD, is that the ADHD brains have differences in the levels of dopamine regulation. I want you to think of dopamine as that chemical in your brain that you feel when something lights you up. So examples could be like when your favorite song comes on in the car and your windows are down, it's that perfect temperature and you're like, oh my God, this just feels so good. Or when you're playing a card game and you have to grab 20 cards and you grab a random pile of cards and you get exactly 20 without counting and you're like, oh my God, that was so satisfying. Those are ways that dopamine lights up in our brain. I think a lot of times people think that it's just something that makes us feel good, but it's a very specific type of feel good. It really is that thing that lights us up. And so in dopamine deficient brains, our brains aren't getting lit up in that way. And that's leading to a lot of this inaction. Our brains, I've said this a million times, I'll say it a million times again, our brains are very intelligent. They want to be efficient. Sometimes they suck. Sometimes for as smart as our brains are, they really actually are very inefficient and they're not helping us be productive because they're prioritizing something else than what we actually want to or need to focus on. So the brain is going to prioritize things that are interesting, things that are new, things that are urgent. This is why people with ADHD, we procrastinate and then we're like, well, yeah, I have no problem getting my shit done when it's the last minute, because your brain senses that dopamine spike. Oh my God, there's an urgency. I have to like go, 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 go. And that's frustrating because we want that to happen before it gets to that point, right? But your brain is going to prioritize those feelings as well as things that are emotionally engaging. So we'll talk about some tricks to kind of essentially trick our brain into thinking we're getting those needs met in the moment when something isn't necessarily checking those boxes. But what I want you to know is that the brain is not going to prioritize what feels boring. The brain is not going to prioritize routine or long-term payoff. That's why we're so focused on in the moment satisfaction. This goes for not just ADHD brains, but every single brain. This stuff applies, right? That's why we get sucked into our TikTok scrolling and why we get sucked into shopping on Amazon, because it's immediate gratification. The brain is not attracted to long-term gratification. It needs long-term gratification. It thrives off of it. But I want you to think of it this way. Your body is not going to get super pumped about a really healthy, fulfilling meal the same way that it's going to from your favorite fast food restaurant or your favorite pasta dish, right? Our brains and our bodies crave that dopamine that we get from stuff that's not super good for us in the long run. And that's not bad. It just means that sometimes we have to be aware of it and get ahead of it. Or again, everything in moderation, those types of concepts really apply. Like I said, this applies to every single brain out there, but especially for ADHD brains, we have to keep this stuff in mind. One of the misconceptions I think about ADHD is that it's solely about the fact that the ADHD brain cannot focus. And that's a very simplified version of it. There's two pieces of this that I think are really important to understand when it comes to ADHD brain. One is that the ADHD brain struggles to filter. So the reason ADHD brain struggles to focus on certain things is when there's overstimulation, when there's too much noise going on in the background, the fan in the bathroom is on, somebody's talking, the dog is barking. When there's too much stimulation, the brain can't focus because it can't filter. The filter that neurotypical brains have can turn off and on when those things happen. The ADHD brain can't. So that's where overstimulation comes in. Now, on the flip side of that, for focus in the ADHD brain, understimulation comes in, not because the ADHD brain struggles with attention point blank, but it struggles with interest-based attention. So if it's understimulated, if it's not getting some of those needs met, the ADHD brain, that switch that clicks on in neurotypical brains that says, okay, time to focus, time to pay attention, it's not going to switch on and off the way that we need it to because of the levels of stimulation in the environment. Okay, so let's talk about what ADHD can actually look and feel like. These might be some things you've said to yourself if you struggle with this, but this piece is really important because I think this is where a lot of the validation comes in. Instead of just being like, oh my God, I'm so lazy, why can't I do what I need to do? We can recognize that this is what it's feeling like, but get to the root of what it actually is. So a lot of times when this comes up, you might find yourself saying like, oh my God, I have so many things to do, but I just can't start. I know I have to do the laundry. I know I have to, if you're a therapist, do my notes. I know that I have to sign my kid up for whatever activity or schedule my dog's nail trim, whatever it is. It might be the simplest thing, but it might feel like I just can't start. I'm frozen. I'm paralyzed. It might feel like scrolling, but not enjoying it. How many times have you sat there scrolling on your phone and you're like, why am I even doing this? I'm not getting anything out of this. The things that I'm seeing aren't making me laugh, aren't making me learn anything, aren't making me feel anything that I want to feel, but I can't stop. It's kind of like your brain is driving the bus when consciously you're aware of something different. It also can look like switching tasks constantly. So this is kind of like that dopamine seeking that goes with the scrolling too. Like we are seeking dopamine because we know to some unconscious level, obviously before this conversation, it's unconscious. Hopefully after this conversation, it feels a little more conscious, but we are aware to some level that we are dopamine deficient. And so we're seeking it out, whether it be through scrolling, switching tasks. Let me start this, but that's not doing it. Let me move to the next. Oh, that's not doing it, right? I think that and this concept of feeling restless all the time with it, feeling stuck, but restless at the exact same time, this is a key indicator that we might be dealing with some understimulation because your brain is craving it. Your brain is saying, I need more, but we don't know what that more is. And it's especially frustrating when we know there's something else we quote unquote should be doing, but our brain won't let us. So it's like, okay, what the hell? Why am I feeling restless? Why am I feeling like I want to do something? But the thing that I actually have to do, I'm like, I'm not going to do that. This is where understimulation really comes into play. The way that I want you to think about this is it's not that you truly don't want to do the thing or you don't want to do anything. You don't want to stop scrolling. You don't want to fold your laundry. It's just that nothing else is activating enough to start or stop or shift in a way that would be productive. Nothing else is activating your brain in the way that it needs to flip that switch into attention and focus and say, all right, it's go time. Let's do what we need to do. So let's put this in a really quick formula as to how this leads to executive dysfunction. Okay, we have understimulation, which leads to or is connected to low dopamine, which then when we go to the activation part, that means there's no activation. Understimulation, no dopamine, that flip of the switch is not happening, which means no initiation. How do you expect a light bulb to turn on if you're not flipping the switch? That's essentially what is happening in the ADHD brain when we can't get ourselves to go. We're expecting the thing to turn on without turning the switch. And when you say it like that, we get so down on ourselves, we get so frustrated with ourselves. Or if you are somebody who your partner, your loved one, your friends, your family have ADHD, you might get so frustrated with them. You can't get frustrated with the light switch if you're not turning it on. Now, I say that in that way because just because you might be struggling with because you have ADHD does not mean you can't find out a way to turn the light switch on. That's the point, is we need to find a way to turn the light switch on. But if you don't know that way yet, you can't get mad at the light switch if you're not turning it on. Things that can be really frustrating with this for the person with ADHD or the partner or loved one of someone with ADHD is it looks like procrastination. It looks like avoidance of tasks. It looks like you're paralyzed and you're sitting on the couch doing nothing when there's 80 million things that could be going around you that you should be doing. And it looks like the I'll do it later loop, right? And that's really frustrating, obviously for the self, but I also want to normalize how frustrating that is for the partner or the loved one or the family member of somebody with ADHD, the parent of somebody with ADHD. Because if you're saying, hey, we got to work together to solve this problem, and the person is like, "Ugh, I'll do it later," or I'm avoiding that, or I'm procrastinating it over and over and over again, that's frustrating. You're not being heard. You're not getting the things done that need to be done. And so I think validating the fact that it is frustrating for both parties and then recognizing why is really important. Not why it's frustrating, but why it happens is really important, because then we can have some empathy, we can have some compassion, whether it be for ourselves or for the other person, and then say, okay, this is a legit issue. This isn't you just being lazy. This isn't you just choosing not to do it. Now let's figure out a way to flip the switch on. Let's figure out a way to give you that stimulation that your brain needs so that you can function in a way that feels better for you, your family, your loved ones as well. Now, one of the things I want to kind of differentiate between here, I know we've talked about the paralysis and the freeze response in the sense of overwhelm. And there is a paralysis response when it comes to understimulation, but it looks a little bit different compared to the paralysis freeze response with overwhelm. So overwhelm looks like too much input. This is that overstimulation where there's too much going on and your brain is like, I can't handle this. I'm freaking out internally. My body's responding weirdly. There's too much action. I don't know what to do. And it's usually associated with more anxiety, and the paralysis comes from a shutdown. Okay, so we have to kind of look at the stimulus of what's going on in order to determine if it is more the overwhelm versus understimulation. Shutdown when it comes to understimulation is more like I'm feeling bored, that kind of like, there's nothing really going on in the environment that has me up in arms, right? I'm not in a freeze response and a trauma sense, or a flight, fight, freeze response as far as like nervous system goes. It's truly that like I'm sitting here and I wish I could will my body to go, but I just won't. Right. So different nervous system experiences between the paralysis and shutdown in overwhelm versus the paralysis and shutdown in understimulation. And I think that's very important to note, because if we're talking about fixing paralysis as a result of understimulation, but you're actually overwhelmed, we don't need to turn the switch on. That's the opposite of what needs to happen there. So we're going to treat those things very differently. So I think it's really important for you to get to know in yourself, like when you're feeling task paralysis, when you're feeling shut down, really be able to identify, is it because of understimulation, that bored feeling, that like kind of like the tortoise in the hare, you're just moving so slow, if at all, and you just can't get yourself to do it. I had a doctor once describe it to me as like, do you feel like you're just dragging your brain around with you? Like your body wants to go, but you're like, come on, brain, let's just do this. Let's go. That's understimulation versus the overwhelm. The overstimulation is like, this is just too much stimulus, anxiety driven, that type of thing. So make sure we're differentiating between the two. Now I want to talk about what to do. So what can you do to turn the switch on? What actually works? The most simple way to do this is to add stimulation. This is why you see so many people or talk to so many people who have ADHD who say, well, I can't really do my chores unless I have a podcast in, unless I'm listening to a book on Audible, unless I'm listening to music, unless I have the TV on in the background. There has to be some sort of stimulation in conjunction with whatever task they're trying to do. The important thing here, this isn't necessarily always about making the task more fun. The thing that you're adding stimulation with does not have to be directly related to the thing you're doing. It can be completely separate, right? So it's not always about like, oh, let me make cleaning more fun by pretending my Swiffer is a microphone. I mean, hell yeah, that's fun too. Do that by all means. But it doesn't have to be about making the activity more fun. Sometimes it purely is, I just need more stimulation in my brain. This is also why a lot of people with ADHD, when they're sitting in complete silence and they're trying to study or read a book or focus on something, they're like, I can't do it. I started out as an education major. I don't know if I've shared that before here, but one of the things that very early on, I was only an education major for maybe like a semester or two before I switched to psychology. But one of the first things they talked about was like, if you have a kid in your class who's doodling, who's drawing while you're teaching, let them doodle and draw. Because if their brain needs more stimulation, them doodling and drawing, it might look like they're not paying attention to you, but that act, that stimulation of drawing on that paper is what is allowing them to pay attention to you. Things like that. Can we add some sort of stimulation that can increase your ability to turn that switch on, even if it's not directly related to whatever it is you're trying to do? Another one with this is body movement. You'll find like a lot of kids when they're sitting down to eat dinner and they can't focus on eating dinner and then they're like wanting to have conversation, shifting and whatever. Let the kid stand up and eat. Let the kid move around a little bit. In classrooms, let the kid stand. Let the kid engage with a fidget or a toy that like moves their body in a different fine motor way that gets their body activated so that they can focus on what's happening. All those things like that. Another thing you can do is change your environment. So if I'm sitting in my four walls of my office and it's like stale air in here and there's nothing going on, there's no stimulation, let me go sit on my deck and focus on what I have to do, because then there's the birds chirping, there's the breeze, there's something else. Go to a coffee shop. A lot of times people will enjoy working and focusing in a coffee shop because there's kind of the white noise of the other patrons in the coffee shop and the activation of things going on in that space. So adding stimulation on purpose can, yes, make the task less boring, but also can just get your brain to a state of stimulation where it says, okay, we're in go mode, we're flipping the switch on, we're doing what we have to do. The other thing that we can do is lower the activation bar. So sometimes it's not necessarily full blown understimulation. It's maybe what we're trying to get ourselves to do. Our brain doesn't have the level of stimulation that it needs to. So if I'm telling myself I have to finish this project, okay, that's a really big task. My brain is going to feel like that's a lot to sort through right now. I need to break it down a little lower. So instead of finish this project, let's open the document. So I'm stimulating my brain by taking these smaller steps. So we're kind of gradually or incrementally adding the stimulation that's associated with the task. So where the first step of, adding stimulation on purpose that could be unrelated, this is more, I'm going to increase stimulation little by little, directly related to whatever task it is that I have to do. That's a really big one that can help, because sometimes that task paralysis can come from like little combination of overwhelm of like there's way too many steps, plus like I don't have the momentum. Sometimes we have to create the momentum to do the thing that we have to do. Another thing we can do for ourselves is create urgency. I think there's a lot of people, myself included, who functioned better in grad school or working for somebody else because there were deadlines, because there was urgency that I had to follow. I didn't determine it for myself. It wasn't like a free for all, like, well, if I don't get to it, I don't get to it. I will tell you, one of the biggest things that kind of highlighted my own symptoms of ADHD was opening my own business, not having a boss, being my own boss. It was kind of like, I don't have any pressure or any urgency coming from any angle. And I look at grad school and I look at how organized I had to be in grad school and be successful. And like, yeah, I I had a lot of urgency. I still procrastinated to the last minute for a lot of fucking things. I sure did. But I had urgency that kind of initiated that versus this kind of arbitrary, I want to get it done by whatever date. So you can give yourself deadlines. You can make somebody else give you deadlines. If you're in a relationship, have your partner say, your deadline for doing this task is Friday at noon. Cool. Okay. Or if you are in therapy, always with my clients, like, do you want me to give you homework? Do you want me to give you a deadline? If we can give ourselves deadlines or have somebody else give us deadlines, sometimes that can create that urgency that will trigger the brain to be like, ooh, this is really important. This is stimulating in a way that's going to help me get the thing done. The other thing we need to do is follow the spark when it's there. If you feel a spark, a little bit of that light you up feeling, or a little bit of that, I think now is the time, you'll lean into that. You don't say, shoot, but I was going to do this first. It's okay to drop what you're doing, obviously within reason, as long as it's not something overly important or essential. I'm not saying like if you're in the middle of cooking dinner and the stove is on and you get the desire to go fold your laundry to say, oh, leave the stove on and go fold my laundry. No, absolutely not. What I am saying is when you do feel that spark, try to lean into that as much as possible, because then your brain is naturally going to build the momentum from there because you're working into your biology versus against it. So when motivation comes, even a little teeny tiny bit, we need to use that. And I think this is a good one to pair with the kind of breaking it down and breaking the barrier or the steps down a little bit. Because if I feel that little spark of motivation, but then my brain goes, okay, finish the project. Nope. Then we're going to get overwhelmed, right? But if I feel that spark and I go, okay, you know what? I'm just going to go open my computer. I'm going to go get my computer. I'm going to bring it downstairs. I'm going to open the document and then I'll go about doing whatever. Use the spark to kind of create some sense of momentum that can keep you going, or at least initiate the task, because what we know is that initiating for the ADHD brain is usually the hardest part. Usually if we start something, then our brain gets fixated on it and we're like, oh, hell yeah, I'm in now, right? So initiating is the hardest part a lot of the times. And if you can lean into that spark to initiate something, that is more than half the battle sometimes. All right, I want to wrap up with something that I think is really important to hammer home. We need to eliminate the shame with this. And I'm talking to not only the individuals who maybe have ADHD or are struggling with understimulation, for their partners and loved ones too. I know it's frustrating. It's frustrating for everybody. We need to eliminate the shame and approach it from a lens of compassion and empathy. And how can we make this better? So take this information, problem solve, brainstorm, figure out what works best for you, have a conversation with your loved one. And I think once we can eliminate the shame, then we're less afraid to try. If there's all this shame compounded in us wanting to overcome a struggle, well, then it's going to be harder, because it's like, well, what if I try and I fail and then all I'm left with is the shame? No, we need to look at, I'm going to try and do trial and error. And I know I have the support of my loved ones and myself. This is not a discipline problem. This is a stimulation problem. You are not lazy. You are not incapable. You are not worthless. Whatever it is that your brain tries to tell you through that shame lens of thinking, you need to challenge that and understand that this is the way your brain is wired. And you can fight against it for your whole life and shame yourself and come down hard on yourself. Or you can say, you know what? This is my spicy little brain and this is what I have to do to work with it. All right. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this gave you some perspective as far as like procrastination goes, or those things that are really hard when it's time to like get moving on something. And I hope you're able to take some tools that if you are somebody who struggles with some understimulation, take it and run with it and trial and error it. And I hope it balances out the perspective that we have about ADHD, because a lot of times we think of that overwhelm and that procrastination because it's overwhelming. And we're not talking about the fact that maybe you're just understimulated. Maybe you just need to pop on your favorite reality TV show while you're folding your laundry. Or maybe you need to just call your best friend while you're going for a walk. Whatever it is that you want to do, you're capable of doing it. Your brain might just need a little extra support, a little extra stimulation to flip that switch on. All right, guys, I hope this was so helpful. As always, please let me know if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, topic ideas. I love to hear from you guys. Leave a comment if you're on Spotify about how you resonated with this information, what stood out to you. Leave a rating and a review wherever you listen to your podcast. And I will be back next week with my first guest, my beautiful friend, Christy Castillo. So if you want to go check her out before listening to that episode, I know you're going to love her. She is just amazing. So go check out her on Instagram at Christy Castillo Fit or on Fuck Your Fitness podcast. Listen to her podcast. And she will be joining us next week with an awesome conversation that I'm so excited for you guys to hear. All right, guys, I'll see you then. Bye. Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Healing Unfiltered podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe,